Hello, and welcome to the Gaia update for the Black Moon Lilith Chiron conjunction that's happening February, March, and April of 2020. I'm Adrienne Elise. So this is an epic conjunction that's bringing forward a lot of stuff in our individual psyche and collective consciousness that seems to have to do with what we need to do to move into the new energies, the new age of Aquarius. So on the 28th of January of 2020, Black Moon Lilith moved into the sign of Aries. Now, let's talk about Black Moon Lilith. Black Moon Lilith is not actually a body or a planet or an asteroid. It's just a spot out there in space, very mysterious. And it has to do with the darkest distortions and darkest feelings and emotions that are generally associated with the feminine. So this spot out there in space is mysterious, just like Black Moon Lilith and the Lilith archetype herself. So this is the moon's apogee, which means it's when the moon, it's in the elliptical cycle of the moon around the earth, around the sun. It is in the where it's furthest away from the earth. And so this is almost like where it can escape the Earth's orbit. And now the moon in our astrological chart and in general represents our emotional life, how we deal with emotions and emotional pain from past lives, as well as our emotional relationship with our mother. And so the moon's apogee, the furthest away it gets from the earth, has to do with the deepest, darkest emotions that we don't want to look at. These are also deep distortions associated with the feminine, but within all of us, that in our collective individual life and then also our collective experience. So Black Moon Lilith it's interesting, it stays about 9 months in a sign. And so it speaks to the gestation period of human pregnancy and birth. And so it moving into Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. And so at the end of January 2020, it moved into the sign of Aries, and it's like a rebirth of our feminine distortions and the deepest, darkest hidden things in our subconscious. Even talking about this Black Moon Lilith energy, I can feel this kind of uncomfortable feeling. These are our deepest, darkest feelings that are so compensated down. They might be our own from early childhood or something we experience that we can't even access in our memory, or perhaps from a past life. These can also be things that are programmed into our DNA through our ancestry. And so these are deepest, darkest feelings that we don't want to look at, and yet we've got to move them if we're going to move in to the new energies and the new age. So let's take a look at this. So January 28th, Black Moon Lilith goes over that Aries point and moves into Aries, bringing Black Moon Lilith into conjunction with Chiron. And Chiron is the wounded healer. So Chiron represents our deepest, darkest wounds that we've experienced over many lifetimes. It's not something you can get in one go or one lifetime. It's a very important energy for these advanced souls, the light worker souls that are here in this human evolution that have had a lot of experiences before ever coming to Earth. And Chiron represents these deepest, darkest, painful experiences that have happened lifetime after lifetime through Earth evolution. So it's a very powerful energy of healing our whole Earth evolution and healing these souls that are very advanced souls but have gotten kind of stuck and trapped into the Earth karma. So these planets coming together is incredibly powerful because we've got our deepest, darkest emotions that we don't want to look at, and deepest, darkest distortions in our psyche, and then our deepest wounds. And it's Chiron, when it interacts with other planets, it's about deep psychic healing that wants to happen. So very powerful and potent energy for this time that we live. And the exact conjunction of Chiron and Black Moon Lilith will happen February 24th through March 1st. So that last week of February is going to be the peak of this energy, 2020. But we're feeling the influence of this all the way from the end of January into mid-April. And so this is flavoring this whole early spring energy, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, this February, March, and April, taking us through the equinox and speaking about how we have a rebirth in our society, in our culture, in our consciousness. We've got to heal in these deepest wounds, and they have to do with deep, dark places within us that we don't want to look at. So Lilith, the name Black Moon Lilith is associated with Lilith in the Old Testament. In the Jewish tradition, Lilith is Adam's first wife. And Lilith would not submit to Adam. And Adam wanted to be on top. And Lilith said that she would also like to be on top and dominate sometimes. And he said no. And so Lilith left. And then God sent angels to try to bring Lilith back, but she wouldn't come. And so she was cast into the underworld, and she became the mother of all demons. So it's a very powerful, interesting energy of the overlap of the power of the feminine, fear of the power of the feminine, and a message through the patriarchal religious structures that it's not a good idea to stand up to your man, because Lilith's answer to Adam was, hey, we're both born of the dust of the earth. We're equal, right? And that didn't fly. So it's really interesting because Lilith represents female power, the power of equality, and yet incredibly demonized, right? And this represents all of the most negative archetypes. And if you think about it, how many negative archetypes of the male? There's the bully, the aggressor, and there you go. The female, there's like the witch, the demon, the whore, the slut, the temptress, you name it. There's so many. And so this represents the role of the feminine being suppressed and demonized by the masculine because of the patriarchal control. Wanting to keep control had to keep the female down. But really, the feminine energy is the power of the universe. Like it's what creates life. In the old ancient times, it was matriarchal cultures because clearly women gave birth to babies. So they had the gift of life. They could bleed and not die, right? And so it was like, oh, yeah, okay. Now, but men fear the power of creation. And of course, now when we're not talking males and females. This is like, even though we are, but it's like we all have this male and female within. We all have these archetypes within. We all have these deep, dark, disgusting feelings. So we're not talking about just men and women. And we have to take into account when we're talking about male and female that we've all incarnated as men and women. Right? We've all been the persecuted and the persecutor. And so we're talking about these energies within us. And yet there's this incredible fear of, we talk about the story in the archetypes. This all started because of the male wanting to stay in control and the fear of the female access to creative power. And so that's demonized, right? And so, but that has all of these energies of the darkest feelings within us, so like low self-worth, the shame, and disempowerment, and kind of been beaten down, the abused, the victim. And then, of course, then we also have to look at the distortions of the masculine that have played that part, and how we may have had lifetimes where we played both. And so much of this astrology right now has to do with both the activation of the divine masculine and cleaning up that feminine so we can come back to a sacred marriage within. And that is the way forward. But there's a lot of work. We've been working on this for a long time with all the Scorpio energy over the last few years. And still we haven't gotten to the deepest, blackest parts. And that's Black Moon Lilith. Because there's things going on in our society that are so dark and black that we can't even look at them. And we've been turning the other cheek. And we can't do that anymore. That's what the astrology is saying. It's like, if you want to move forward into the new age, gotta clean up this stuff. And so the Black Moon Lilith represents these deepest, darkest emotions individually, distortions, things that have happened to us, things we've experienced that we can't remember a lot of times, but they make us feel horrible inside. Things that we've experienced that the world says, oh, it's fine, nothing's wrong, that didn't happen to you. Gaslit, where we've been gaslit, where we've been disempowered, where we've been invalidated again and again. And so that's individually. Also, our deepest, darkest shame, where could be programmed from past lives or stuff that we feel like we've done wrong in past lives that we can't access, or dark, shameful feelings around who we are in this life. We all have it. But most of us have compensated that down to a little tiny black box. And it's like the black box that has the memories that we need to free ourselves. And it's the black box that holds the key to our freedom and to our spiritual evolution. And yet nobody wants to go anywhere near that box. And this is what holds up most people in their spiritual evolution, is not wanting to go and be in that darkness. Because Black Moon Lilith, this place out in space that's just got a power to it, it kind of speaks to the galactic center and to the great mother energy and to the source of all. And that it's mysterious and it feels like it could just eat you alive and annihilate you into nothing, And this is this fear of creation energy. And yet that's the power of the universe. And this creation energy is so fun to work with and use in our lives. But if we're compensated into fear around it, then we can never access that creative power. And so we've got to get through these dark places in order to access the power of that light within us. And that's what this astrology is all about. Now, this begins a very powerful culmination at the beginning of February, on February 9th, with the full moon in Leo, when Venus crosses over the Aries point, going from Pisces to Aries, and comes into conjunction with Black Moon Lilith and Chiron. So even though they're not exactly conjunct until the end of February, it all starts on that full moon. And so the whole month of February is really powerfully in this energy, because Venus is stirring it all up. Because Venus is like our day-to-day feminine, our everyday, what we love, what makes us feel good, our self-esteem, or what we care about, what's beautiful to us, And Venus doesn't want to look at this dark stuff, right? Like, it's like, that's not beautiful. That's not part of the feminine, right? And so there we go with the turning the other cheek and the denial and the escapism and what we've allowed to happen in our society because we don't want to look at it. And that's what this conjunction is all about. And then we've got Chiron there, these deep, deep wounds of over lifetimes, and yet when Chiron, like we said, interacts with these other planets, it's time for that deep psychic healing to occur. Chiron in Aries is about the wounds have to do with where we haven't been true to who we are. And maybe this is the message. It's like when we're holding this blackness inside of ourselves and calling it something bad and distorted, and when our planet is hosting satanic ritual abuse and dark energies like pedophilia, we can't be true to who we are as humans. Like, we've been told a story that that's who we are. And it's not who we are at all. And we've been told that we hate each other and we want to kill each other, and that we're dark, lower life forms with no morality. And that's complete and total lie. So Black Moon Lilith and Chiron in Aries is kind of a return of righteous morality in a way, and standing up for what's right and good and true. Aries is a male sign. So, and Chiron represents, even though Chiron's a wounded healer, which often the issues have to do with when you have been a healer, and often that meant you were in a female body. But it's a male energy, and then how to deal with this wounded healer, how to get back to the empowered masculine. And in Aries, it's about the right to exist as who you really are. And that's the wounds of this time that we're in. And we're speaking to, Chiron in Aries is speaking to the wounds of where we've had to pretend we're different than who we are in order to survive. Because Aries is like ruled by Mars, which is life and death, survival, and fight and flight, kind of that type of energy. And so we're looking at past lives where we weren't able to be who we are, or we'd be killed, and it goes right back to those stories of the persecuted healer, and maybe the origin of some of the deepest, darkest feelings of shame and low self-worth in these souls. And so it's time to bring it all into the light. Aries is a fire sign, and it's like bring it into the light, empower it. Aries wants freedom, breaking the chains more than anything. And Aries wants to move forward. That, with Mars as the ruler. And so it's kind of like maybe releasing the feminine from this darkness can allow the divine masculine to incarnate into his strength within us too, because the masculine is where we stand up for ourselves, have boundaries, protect ourselves, stand up for what's right and good and true in our world, which is what we haven't been able to do because we're too busy trying to stay alive, right? And too busy being told that as healers we're the devil. So it's a very confusing energy, and yet it's all got to get sorted out. And that's the Black Moon Lilith. It's like empty and dark and hidden and mysterious and total lies and illusions. And so we're looking at revealing and healing the lies and delusions of this world. And there's a lot of them, and it has a lot to do with the leaders of the structured religions and our governments that we trusted the most, people we were taught to trust the most. We shouldn't have been trusting at all. And where we gave our power away to forces that are using our energy for really dark magic, and they're using that black magic against us. And so Black Moon Lilith can rule a fear of the occult, fear of magic, and yet it's a distortion of that magic. And there is dark magic happening on the planet, and they are feeding us. It's interesting because Lilith, part of her archetype is that she's a succubus, she suck the life out of you and steal the sperm of the men and stuff. But that's kind of what's been going on in our world, and why this paradigm is so hard to break out of is that they're keeping us disempowered and disconnected from our own power, this creation energy, probably through all this grief and trauma, right? And so, but then they're using that power themselves, the control energies, to create the lower matrix. And, so it's like they're using our own power against us. And then these dark practices to keep us in fear and keep us from our spiritual evolution. And it's gone on for far too long. It's time for us to stand up and take our planet back, take our reality back, and get moving on this spiritual evolution. This was interrupted, our spiritual ascension process back in Atlantean time. This whole energy started, these control energies, could be like up to 100,000 years ago or more. It's too long for this to go on. We've been held back for far too long. And but the fear energy around the occult and fear of magic, and that is a lot of what comes up for people as their spiritual awakening starts to happen. They'll go to these darker places in the lower astral realm, and then they'll get knocked right back down. Like, I don't want to deal with that fear. But that fear is the same energy that's like, it's programming, and it's in that black box that we have of this compensated places that in order to just survive and make it through this strange reality of being a spirit in a human body, we just kind of got to get through. And so we've compensated all this fear and darkness. And yet when we go to try to ascend beyond these energies, these realms, those flare up. And so most people are stuck in their spiritual evolution because of these hidden fears, subconscious fears and subconscious dark distortions. And yet that's the key to moving forward, is to go and get into these places, face the music. This is our individual dark feelings within, going into that black box, into the void, into the unknown. And that's where we can actually find our true self and find the light of truth of who we are. And then as a society and our collective, we got to bring forward and look at these things that might make us feel sick to our stomach, but are the truth, things that are going on that are we can't stand for anymore on our planet. But as long as we're turning the other cheek and pretending that it's not happening, and this is the hard thing because there's so much evidence of these things happening in our world, the people we trusted doing very dark things like pedophilia and cannibalism and satanic ritual abuse, and but still we can't move out of these energies till we're willing to face the truth that they're happening, and doing that makes you sick to your stomach. It feels yucky. And yet there's also, because we're part of a one, we have this within us. So when we clear our black box and we overcome our fear of the darkness, and we can go sit with ourselves and go into that place of the void and move through the void and find that great mother, find the energy of the universe, our own light that can hold us through this experience, we can also help heal the collective and bring the darkness on our planet that's keeping us from our spiritual evolution into the light of day, so that it can be revealed and healed and cleansed and purged. And this is a big energy with these soul groups that are drawn to my work. It has a lot to do with the Pluto-Uranus conjunction that happened in the mid-60s. And that happened in Virgo. And it was kind of a message. Virgo is a healer. It wants to clean things up, wants to sort things through, find the truth. And so those planets coming together, it was like revolutionary change. And it seems to have an energy of like these greater soul groups that were really activated and started coming in at that time and somewhere on the planet, and then continued to come, that have been coming throughout time, but not all at the same time. And these soul groups have a bigger, wider destiny of cleaning up the earth from these distortions. And so it's kind of time to get into the next chapter of this bigger, greater destiny of these soul groups, and bring the darkness into the light of day so we can kick that stuff off the planet and get on with our spiritual evolution. So I hope that you can use this time to your advantage to go into that black box and go into the fear and release all that's within you, and all that programming of fear and those distortions from those painful past lives. And also as we do this individually, support the collective in this planetary cleansing process that we're in. And so I hope you have a wonderful February, March, and April 2020. And I look forward to seeing you on the next update. Until then, I'm Adrienne Elise. Namaste.